We've come to the most dangerous planet in the universe.
Predator. Badlands is a 2025 American science fiction action film directed by Dan Trachtenberg and written by Patrick Aison from a story by Trachtenberg and Aison. The seventh installment in the Predator franchise and set after the events of The Predator 2018. It stars Elle Fanning and Dimitrius Schuster-Koloamatangi in leading roles. The story follows Dek, a young exiled Yautja who crash lands on a hostile planet and must prove himself worthy of the hunt by killing an apex predator, leading him to form an alliance with Thia, a Weyland-Yutani Corporation android. Predator. Badlands premiered at the TCL Chinese Theater on November 3, 2025, and was released in the United States on November 7 by 20th Century Studios. The film received generally positive reviews from critics and grossed over $184 million worldwide. Dan Trachtenberg loves The Predator more than most people love their own children, but that doesn't quite explain why his Predator movies, of which there are suddenly now 3, continue to be so much better than all of the series' previous sequels, spin-offs, and reboots, let alone most of the IP-driven garbage that Hollywood churns out on the regular. No, Trachtenberg's Predator movies are so uncommonly satisfying because his love for the franchise's extraterrestrial trophy hunters allows him to celebrate how dumb they are. No disrespect to the many different warrior tribes who may have inspired the Yautja, but there's something fundamentally backwards about a hyper-advanced alien species that, despite having solved intergalactic travel, still only knows how to measure its own worth in murder and masculine aggression. 'Twas ever thus, on earth as it is in the heavens, but Trachtenberg recognizes that the Predators are always just a bit more embarrassing than they are badass. The genius of the franchise reviving Prey and last summer's utterly awesome Killer of Killers is that they both cast the Yautja as a foil first and an antagonist second. Now, the super fun and fantastically spirited Predator, Badlands, takes that approach to its logical conclusion by making one of these creatures the hero of a story in which he gets deprogrammed of his cultures, the most dangerous game-inspired approach to other species. Yes, Alien vs. Predator struck a short-lived Yautja-human alliance out of situational necessity, but Trachtenberg's latest hunt takes direct aim at the evolutionary uselessness of being the universe's biggest assholes. The xenomorphs aren't smart enough to know any better, but these ugly motherfuckers have invisibility cloaks and triangulated laser sights. They've been around long enough to have teeth, Rex skulls on their mantelpieces. They are, collectively, now the only performers in movie history who have ever shared the screen with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Elle Fanning, and they've held their own against them both. And yet, for all of those accomplishments, the Yautja's religious credo has never evolved beyond prey to none, friend to none, predator to all. Congrats for surviving more than 65 million years on the hellish Star Wars concept art of a planet you idiots call home. But as someone asks at a crucial moment during the middle of Badlands, who would want to survive on their own? True to Predator style, that's a question Patrick Aison and Brian Duffield's script answers less with gooey sentiment than with ruthless practicality. It's a lot easier to survive with some help. In theory, that should appeal to a member of the Yautja clan. Or, as the case may be, a runty youngling determined to prove his worth and be accepted into his father's clan. His name is Dek. He's played with terrific expressiveness by Dimitrius Schuster-Koloamatangi. The movie is only a few minutes old before he offers us a heart-rending portrait of what fear looks like on a predator's toothy face. And if the ultra-Darwinian wildlife on his birth planet doesn't kill him, then his dad will be all too happy to finish the job. also played by Schuster-Koloamatangi. Enjoer likes to think of himself as the king shit apex Yautja, and he's so disgusted by the scrawniness of his youngest son that he instructs the elder Quay, Mike Hommick, to kill Dek in his sleep. But Quay, in the first display of mercy or kindness that Dek has ever seen, refuses to slay his own brother. Instead, he sends Dek to the death planet Jenna, where the undersized youngling will have a chance to prove his worth by slaying a creature that no member of his species has ever been able to kill, the fearsome Kalisk. So begins the first Predator film in which the eponymous hunter is far and away the most vulnerable character, a novelty that Badlands stresses by dropping Dek into the middle of a live-action, scavenger's reign. Jenna, pronounced with a hard G, and not like George W. Bush's daughter, more than lives up to its reputation, in that absolutely everything on the planet has evolved to kill anyone unlucky enough to crash land there. The grass is made out of razors, the trees have deep rising-style tentacles for branches, and even the cute named Luna bugs are eldritch horrors waiting to bring death from above. Jenna's bland gray landscapes may fall well short of Pandoran wonder, though random sky lava makes up for any manner of sins. But its flora and fauna are a constant delight, and there isn't a doubt in our minds that even a trained survivalist like Dek would die in about 10 minutes flat without some of the help he's been conditioned to see as a weakness. Enter Thia, a Weyland-Yutani synthetic who's been ripped in half by the very beast that Dek has come to kill. Despite being separated from her legs and stranded on a perch where she's had nothing to do but study the planet's indigenous life, the chipper and childlike artificial humanoid immediately becomes the happiest character this franchise has ever seen. And Elle Fanning's extremely winning performance, an awards-worthy marvel of ingenuity, guilelessness, and troubled empathy, makes her the most interesting character this franchise has ever seen almost just as fast. She promises to help guide Dek to the Kalisk's den if he agrees to help reunite her with her lower half, an offer that Dek can only bring himself to accept by thinking of Thia as a tool. And so the two begin their journey across the wilds of Jenna, the synth strapped to the Predator's back. It's all very Luke and Yoda, but if Luke were a curmudgeonly hunter whose species had evolved in a way that made it impossible for them to smile, and if Yoda were a button-nosed chatterbox whose ancient wisdom belied the naivete of a teenage girl on the brink of her first heartbreak, it's no spoiler to say that Thia's much-discussed sister, Tessa, also played by Fanning, doesn't share our new favorite synth's capacity to care about other creatures. Confronting the Poe-faced seriousness of the Predator franchise with the same insolence that's required of Dek to stand up to his dad. Badlands exalts in the endearing dynamic that forms between these two characters, and it refuses to flinch away from that charm, even when the movie threatens to steer closer to sweeter, more streaming-friendly territory than die-hard Predator fans might have liked. Crucially, however, Trachtenberg and his screenwriters find ways to be cute without pandering, just as they find ways to be absolutely brutal without shedding human blood, a workaround that allows them to honor the franchise's brutality under the auspices of a PG-13 rating. I got more than a little nervous when the heroes team up with an adorable CGI creature, who Thia names Bud. Imagine an adorably huge-eyed green monkey with iron skin. But Badlands deploys the little guy to perfection, cleverly positioning Bud as a reminder of Jenna's kill or be killed savagery rather than as a simple concession to post-Grogu economics. Unlike Thia, who has the benefit of a universal translator, kindness, or at least a begrudgingly mutual concern, is the closest thing that Dek and Bud have to a shared language, and it's consistently rewarding to watch both of these characters learn to speak it on their own terms. Dek has been taught that to forgive weakness is to show weakness, and yet weaknesses like grief, longing, and sensitivity all become essential tools in his quest to kill the Kalisk and escape from Jenna in one piece. In fact, those tools prove even more essential to this story than familiar Yautja weaponry, which Trachtenberg nevertheless finds a number of novel and exciting ways to mix into the combat. The awesomeness factor here is never cranked quite as high as it was in Killer of Killers. But the action is so full of fist-pumping moments that I almost didn't care that the climax is staged in the most generic location imaginable, or that it threatens to devolve into a better staged version of the Pixel vs. Pixel kaiju fights that have made the recent Kong movies feel all but weightless. Such audience-friendly pivots away from the franchise's core principles might have been disastrous in a lesser version of this film. But even, or especially, the least Predator-like moments in this standalone sequel are rooted in Trachtenberg's love for the property, and all help Badlands to make a uniquely compelling argument that Predator deserves to be higher on the Hollywood food chain than anyone thought to place it over the last 40 years. By reckoning with the series' fundamental weakness rather than continuing to pretend that it's the series' greatest strength, Trachtenberg has made the brand richer than ever before. No, this isn't your daddy's Predator, and it definitely isn't Deck's daddy's Predator. But as a wise synthetic once said, we can be more than what they ask of us. How rare and extremely refreshing to see a big studio movie recognize that the same can be true of itself. When you hear that a new entry in a famously American R-rated franchise has been handed the dreaded American PG-13 rating, you cringe a little. You get flashbacks to Die Hard 4 and others who were forced, kicking and screaming, into the lower rating to make it more marketable. However, today we look at a film that bucks that trend by being a fun, family-friendly film that remains grounded in its universe. So, to set the scene, we open on the Predator homeland of Yautja Prime, where Dimitrius Schuster-Koloamatangi is sparring off with his brother Quay, Mike Hommick. While Deck is a runt in Yautja society, his brother sees his strength and worth. Deck should have the chance to go on a hunt and prove himself in Yautja society. Unfortunately, their father enjoyer, Dimitrius Schuster-Koloamatangi, feels differently. Deck manages to escape and lands on Jenna, a planet where every part of the biosystem is out to kill you. However, it is the home of the Kalisk, a creature so powerful that no Yautja has succeeded in killing it, and it even scares Deck's father. But before you can get to the Kalisk, you need to survive Jenna, and maybe the synth Thia Elle Fanning might be your only hope to pull that off. I have seen a lot of films set in this universe. Many of them are rubbish, but what sets the good ones apart, like Predator, Badlands, Prey, and even Alien Romulus, is their ability to create characters you care about and who have great chemistry with each other. Alien Covenant is a stunning film filled with mostly disposable characters, and can you even remember one person from the Predator? I can't. But Predator, Badlands attacks this issue in a number of ways. First, it reduces the number of characters in this film down to 5 or 6, depending on your classification. This gives you so much time to get to know everyone in the film and what drives them, which is especially important for Deck, who spends most of the movie without the traditional armor silhouette. The next aspect comes from chemistry. The bond between Deck and Thia is almost instant because they both complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. It is both fascinating and fun to watch them grow together in a world where everything is out to kill you, even the trees, especially the trees. Both of the actors fall entirely into their roles, and it was a blast to watch them perform. Part of what helps their journey is that both characters are presented with early setbacks, which makes you, as an audience, want to see them succeed. I can't clearly articulate just how much fun the two characters are, and I hope the two actors had as much fun filming this film as it felt like watching it. I've never been thrown before now lives rent-free in my head, and in this economy, I wish it could chip in a bit more. The next strength of this film is its world building, because it handles lore effortlessly. We get a lot of heavy lifting about Yautja society, but it never bogs things down. There is such a conservation of information in the script, dropping big moments, but without skipping a beat, it is honestly fascinating to watch. Even if you don't know who or what Weyland-Yutani is, you get their deal from the second Tessa, Elle Fanning, talks to Mu/Th/Er. But also, if you do understand, well then, It just creates another layer for you to experience the film. However, while the script does a lot of the world building, much of it also comes from, well, the world. Even before the credits rolled, you knew they were filming in New Zealand, and what a beautiful world they created, combining the in-camera locations with the digital extensions added by the artists from Weyland and more. There is an early scene with a moon in the background that is stunning to watch. However, what sells you on this world is how everything feels like it could fit in that sort of biosystem. Jenna and Yautja Prime also provide a perfect juxtaposition for each other, which was fascinating to watch. I also like how they brought Deck to life digitally. It feels a little odd at the start, but soon you are completely with it. The themes in this film are not that deep, but they take on a more complex facade than the usual surface-level nuance you get in many similar films. There is found family, industry v nature, corporatization of nature, and of course, unfinding your family. But within that space, you have a world to find and also get to watch the characters discover their own worlds as well. There is no real surprise as to who the bad guys are or not, and I am not sure this is a film that needed that. It also helps that, for the first time in this franchise, that I know of, our central protagonist is one of the predators, and this was an interesting way of taking everything you expect from a film like this and shifting it slightly off balance. Where Predator, Badlands excelled was in how it managed its tone. It is hard to imagine the first ever PG-13 Predator film working at all, but they absolutely stuck the landing here. Part of that comes from clever planning, such as setting your movie on a planet filled with creatures that don't bleed red blood. This gives you the ability to show quite a lot of carnage in the film without bumping up that rating. Also, thematically, it feels like this film is drawing significantly from the 1980s action films and how it sets up its narrative and action. However, there is also a modern framework bolted on, which creates a fascinating hybrid. This was in many ways a brutally gruesome film, yet it was also probably the film I have had the most fun with so far this year. Shout out to every Chekhov's gun, slug, tree, and razorgrass, but to name a few. Director Dan Trachtenberg takes his third crack at Yautja lore with Predator, Badlands, and this time the protagonist is the galaxy's most notorious trophy hunter himself. It's a pretty wild shift in perspective for the franchise, but one that I think Trachtenberg pulls off. After Prey and Predator, Killer of Killers got Hulu-only releases, the Yautja are finally back on the big screen. Predator, Badlands follows Deck, a little brother, runt of the litter, as he's exiled from his clan and on the deadliest planet in the galaxy trying to earn his stripes. Well, his stripes and a cloaking device. It's a rite of passage storyline that should sound familiar, which is exactly why it works so well for this movie and the point of view change it's attempting. It's hard to flesh out mythology like this, though. Being 7 movies deep into a franchise that's had a handful of twists and turns and failures, deciding where to shift focus is a near impossible task. Trachtenberg's answer to that is an elegant solution, which is to say, you know, just being a little brother can be hard. Dan Trachtenberg's track record, his Dan Track 10 record, shows that he knows how to build a good movie. His films are structured with clean and simple storylines, but he stages sequences well, blocks scenes efficiently, and puts the camera in all the right places to get the most out of those simple premises. Badlands is yet another example in his filmography of doing all the small things right. Little personal details get set up early in the movie, like the reason Deck's missing a fang and what that means to him and his brother, that come back to play an important role in the plot later on. It's simple but effective filmmaking, textbook even. But most importantly, there's always a relatable, emotional core to what Trachtenberg's doing. That's what made Prey and Killer of Killers such novel entries in the Predator canon. Amber Midthunder's Naru and Killer of Killers' cast of poor frozen bastards from across time all had proper emotional reasons to fight and survive. Deck in Badlands is no different. The other half of the protagonist duo is Deck's new Weyland-Yutani synth pal, Thia. Elle Fanning is programmed to be an awa-shucks kind of synthetic that ultimately learns as much from Deck as he does from her. She's got a hard-coded good nature that takes her on a similar emotional journey as her new Yautja bestie. She's got a wholesome quality that I don't think has been seen outside of some quieter, family-based moments in Trachtenberg's other two Predator entries. By the end of the movie, though, Thia has some of the most charming and creative ass-kicking in the whole story, and Fanning really pulls it off. But the ass-kicking that had me chuckling and giddy, that was all Dex. There's a moment in the final act that had me saying, yes, that is the Predator. Granted, it came a little late in the runtime, but it's definitely there. The fighting is a mix of a clever use of his surroundings and brutal head stomping, which, by the way, is how I would describe the action in all the best parts of Predator as a franchise. But speaking of the ass-kicking, that they're on a distant alien planet is really the only reason this movie is PG-13. As the first non-R-rated Yautja hunt, this movie still goes pretty hard. The biggest difference is that it's all alien gore splashing around. If it were people, like it was in Prey and Killer of Killers even, the brutality with which Deck goes about his business would be an easy R rating. Aesthetically speaking, the creature design is pretty good. The alien death planet is populated with ravenous flora and fauna, and while they compare unfavorably to the creatures of Avatar, for example, they are better than most. And there's something very engaging about Deck and Thia encountering one deadly thing after another, learning a quick and important fact about them, then killing and eating them. And nothing dies the same way. All those vine things we see him fighting in the trailer, not a single one of them gets a repeat dispatching. To be fair, there is also a certain amount of, and hold on to your shoulder cannons here, cuteness in this movie. It makes sense and it moves the story along, so it's not cuteness just to sell toys or shill a new ride at Disneyland. But it is ironically an alien idea in a Predator movie. Some of it works, some of it doesn't, of course, but Deck is such an earnest young Yautja. The kid tries to make a joke. It's one of the moments that doesn't really work, but it plays as that overly literal style of humor you get from characters like the Terminator. He's just programmed a certain way and he's slowly learning a different way. But even though the joke didn't fully land, I appreciate the effort. Once you open the door to the Yautja having a language, they can immediately start telling you who they are. From there, it's no surprise that Deck is a unique specimen among his clan, a little different from the rest, which is fine because how boring would that be if they were all the same? Trachtenberg and screenwriters Patrick Aison and Brian Duffield take great pains to portray Deck as eager to prove himself and passionate about the Yautja way of life, but also a little worried about his place in it. And actor Dimitrius Schuster-Koloamatangi manages a subtlety in his performance that makes Deck a downright relatable dude. He's not any less strong, less violent or more gore-averse than any Predator that's been on screen so far. He's out for vengeance. He loves stabbing his prey in the head and bathing in its viscera. But he's also mad and smart and capable and underestimated. It's the same story we saw with Naru from Prey. They even repurposed a line of dialogue from Prey to drive that point home, making Deck's story a very familiar one, surrounded by equally familiar imagery from the Yautja ship and weapons to the Alien franchise Easter eggs. But that's exactly what's needed to shift the POV. You need the familiar to get away with the new. One of those new things is the Yautja Codex, which we got our first peek at in Killer of Killers. Badlands gives us another look at these biblical commandments that guide the entire culture of the hunters. And even though there was a divided reaction to Arnold Schwarzenegger's Dutch and Danny Glover's Harrigan showing up in a post-release post-credit Killer of Killers scene, which I believe set the record for the furthest post-credits a post-credit scene has ever landed. I like what Trachtenberg and his team are doing here. There's something to be said for not revealing too much of your monster, though. It's the don't show the shark rule of filmmaking. But as much as the last 3 entries in this franchise have added to the lore, there's still plenty we don't know about the Yautja. But Trachtenberg isn't only interested in breaking new ground. Badlands makes great use of everything Predators have done to be interesting in the 40 years since that original ugly motherfucker first blew up a jungle, and all the special ops badasses in it. In fact, The thing Badlands seems to understand better than anything is that there are only so many ways you can do oh no. What are these giant things that are trying to kill us? Before that well runs dry. After all, there are literally decades worth of movies that failed to live up to the first one. Dan Trachtenberg cracked the code a little with Prey by giving the protagonist something to prove. Killer of Killers took it the next step by digging a little further into the culture of the predators. And the natural progression is putting a Yautja in the protagonist's seat with a chip on his shoulder. These three movies are almost an equation. Prey multiplied by Killer of Killers equals Badlands. With the Disney takeover of 20th Century Studios, is it any surprise that the Predator franchise would somehow get, well, a little disnified? Predator, Badlands is to the Predator franchise what Fast 5 was to the Fast and Furious franchise. It's a reframing of old characters that plows ahead in a different manner than the films that came before it. Like Fast 5, Predator, Badlands is unmistakably enjoyable and a ton of fun, but it seems less dangerous and more family-friendly in its operations. More on that later. First off, it's evident that director Dan Trachtenberg, who helmed two standout Predator installments in Prey and Predator, Killer of Killers, has a vast appreciation for Predator and Yautja, the official name for these hunters' lore, and there's no doubt that he brings untold respect to his franchise entries. Along with screenwriter Patrick Aison, Trachtenberg also doesn't shoehorn in flip references to previous films. No, you are one ugly motherfucker, or if it bleeds, we can kill it callbacks. This story was meant to stand on its own, and it does. That alone gives Predator, Badlands, a leg up, as we can see him trying new things in this world without insulting prior canon. We experience this immediately as we enter the story on the Yautja homeworld, with the runt of a Yautja clan working hard to prove his mettle. By any measure on their world, Dimitrius Schuster-Koloamatangi is deficient, seen as weak by his brother Quay, Mike Hammock, and most notably their father, Elle Schuster-Koloamatangi, in a dual role. We're introduced to all three of them amid darkly lit action, and an almost Klingon-like adherence to honor, bravery, and strength, which none of them believe Dek possesses. Trachtenberg humanizes the Yautja with language developed by linguist Britton Watkins, and emotion, two characteristics I don't recall from previous films in this franchise. In establishing these three, the conflict comes quickly and easily, with Dek planning on going to a dangerous planet to bring back the skull of a legendary beast and prove his worth, while Elle chastises Quay for not carrying out his assignment, the assassination of Dek himself. Weakness must be culled, Elle says, intent on eliminating his own son for the sake of the clan. Yeah, harsh in nit. Before too long, Dek finds himself escaping his homeworld with a destination set for Jenna, an inhospitable planet that is actively trying to kill anything that sets foot upon it. Calling Jenna inhospitable doesn't even begin to describe the peril any visitor puts themselves in just by being on its surface. Trachtenberg has said in interviews that every shot in this film required the use of visual effects. I don't blame him, as the sights we see are the impossible brought to life. Plants that seem to activate and breathe just before expelling poison needles into any passerby that dares disturb it, with a winged, pteranodon-like bird circling and waiting for something to get shot, outsized worm-like things that spit acid, and the upper half of a sentient android named Thia, Elle. Her introduction hails the beginning of Predator, Badlands as a buddy movie, the language barrier hand-waved away by her onboard universal translator function. While Dek is a Yautja of few words, Thia could be likened to Harvey Gullane's Perito in Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, wanting to know anything and everything about Dek. Elle plays her as a talkative, inquisitive ray of sunshine, quite contrary to Dimitrius Schuster-Koloamatangi's Dek, a dark, menacing, and calculating fish out of water. They're an odd couple, to be sure, but half the fun is watching Dek carry Thia around like Chewbacca does with C-3PO in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. By now, you can surely see where this is going, and if your head's tilting quizzically about how the Yautja have been demystified and sort of defanged, that's all right. Predator, Badlands takes its cues from familiar staples like the aforementioned films, Star Trek, and almost every story that shows a character's transition from weak to strong, often accompanied by a near quixotic, foolhardy task that changes midway once the film's heart gets exposed. This heart lies in Bud Rohinal Nayaran, a diminutive, monkey-like creature separated from her family. With the addition of Bud, we start to see that Deck's Yautja family is slowly being replaced by beings, organic or not, that respect him. Another factor in Deck's journey is the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, also known as the Company from the Alien franchise. They've established an outpost on this hellscape for its weapons development division, and let me interject here. Seriously, why is Weyland-Yutani always trying to pull some idiotic stunt with its weapons division? Since Ellen Ripley discovered that Mu Thur set the Nostromo down on LV-426 on company orders nearly 50 years ago, in real lifetime, and with what we've seen in the outstanding FX series, Alien, Earth, every endeavor this corporation undertakes to amp up its weapons division results in abject failure and disaster. Through Weyland-Yutani and the presence of Thia's cold, unfeeling synthetic twin sister, Tessa, Fanning also in a dual role, we experience the ruthlessness of corporatism and capitalism, especially underscored by the fact that there are exactly 0 human beings in this movie. Weiyu's outpost is fully staffed by synthetics, whoops, artificial persons, sorry, Bishop, and every decision is made with one objective in mind, get what Weyland-Yutani wants. It's a very satisfying bonding of the Alien and Predator franchises, more so than the Alien vs. Predator films, in my opinion. It's done uniquely, digging into the subtleties of the company while also hitting you over the head with how pervasive their presence is. I've never believed that xenomorphs are the villains. From minute one, Weyland-Yutani is the aggressor in every one of these movies. The xenomorphs are just territorial and pissed off that they've been disturbed. This PG-13 Predator movie is paced to thrill and reveals an impressive undercurrent of humanity in a world with no humanity at all. While Deck embodies, or at least aspires to his species' ideals and ethos, his sympathetic story and eventual rising tend to follow a very tried and true arc, with Thia's banter and lightheartedness bringing levity to this death trap of a planet. While Predator, Badlands does take a little bit of the danger and threat of the Yautja away in service of creating an underdog family out of Deck, Thia, and Bud. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Through Thia, we gain insight into what drives the Yautja, and learning about their hierarchies and values adds a new layer to the human-Yautja interactions we've seen before. In this light, Predator, Badlands becomes an indispensable part of Yautja lore, offering solid action and providing a fresh, engaging perspective on a nearly 40-year-old franchise.